The Memory of Love, Chapter 21. 2 hours after the end of his shift, and Kai has cleaned the kitchen, washed the dishes, thrown out all the old food in the fridge, wiped the surfaces, and emptied the bin of rubbish and ants. Next, he rearranged the front room, punching the cushions and shaking the mats. With a switch broom borrowed from the caretaker, he swept the dust out of the door. Then he stripped the soiled sheets from under Adrian, tipping a porter to remove them and return with clean ones, and made up the bed, moving Adrian from one side of the bed to the other with practiced efficiency. Minutes later, the porter returned with a bag of food, and Kai entered the kitchen and set about making soup, a clean, clear broth, to which he added an entire Scotch bonnet paper, crushed on the back of a wooden spoon, and a dash of lime. Now he sits on the seat, while the soup simmers, glances through some of the papers on the coffee table, flicks through a reference book, reading a sentence here, a chapter heading there. He says his head back and closes his eyes. In a moment, images begin to rise, fragments of dreams. He shakes his head and forces his eyes open. He is not sleeping well, and sleep, when it comes, chooses inopportune moments. He hasn't been home in 3 days, going instead straight from the theater to Adrian's apartment. He enters the bedroom carrying a bowl of soup. At the sound of the bowl being set upon the nightstand, Adrian opens his eyes. Kai leaves and returns with another bowl, this time of water, plus soap and towel. I can use the bathroom, you know. Sure you can. Easier for me to carry the bowl than you, that's all. Adrian smiles and pulls himself up. He washes his hands. In the 3 days he has grown leaner, the bones of his face thrown into relief. Kai hands him the bowl and soup and spoon. Pepper soup, all time cure, everything from hangovers to malaria, good for the soul too, like Jewish chicken soup, only better. Both have proven curative and restorative powers. I believe you. Good. I was dreaming, says Adrian, in between sips. Swimming underwater, the fish, the colors, my God, is this what it is like? Kai nods. Mild delirium, maybe. The medication can sometimes have that effect, not just the illness. A movement at the window on the other side of the room causes them both to turn. It is the sunbird. The bird's body is curved. His wings work so fast as to be invisible to the naked eye. Just the slender body of the bird. A comma banging in the air, or a pause in a moment in time. Kai has moved the feeder to a place outside the window of the bedroom. Earlier in the day, the sight of it from the kitchen window had revived a memory from childhood. He must have been very young indeed, for the memory came without accompanying thoughts, only physical sensations of following a bird such as this through a garden, not to watch it, but to imitate it. He remembered picking a flower and putting it in his mouth. The dustiness of the pollens, the taste of crushed petals, and finally the sweetness. Adrian's sketchbook and paints are on the floor next to the bed, where Kai has placed them. I feel too much like shit to be bored, Adrian says. You wait. You'll need to rest at least a week before you go back to work. You'll be bored. I can't afford a week. Listen. Kai sits on the edge of the bed. The last guy who declined the advice I've just given you, we shipped back home 3 months later. He didn't work again for a year. It's not just the malaria. Your body is fighting on all fronts in this climate. If you're born here, you get used to it. On the other hand, there's a reason life expectancy is so short. So take my advice. On Adrian's behalf, Kai telephones Ileana and also sends a message to the old man's room. Afterwards, he collects some medicine from the hospital pharmacy and makes his way along to Adrian's apartment again. The guy in the private room, you told me about him. Pulmonary fibrosis, right? Right. I guess I didn't bother to read the name on the notes. Why? Do you know him? Yes. Well, knew him from the university. He was a lecturer, is that right? More than that, he was Dean of Humanities in my time. Oh, says Adrian. Is there a reason you ask? Kai takes a breath. Not really. How are you doing with that soup? I feel better already. I'll let you finish it, says Kai. He leaves the bedroom, crosses the living room, opens the front door, and looks out at the hospital quadrangle. Alias call. How that name takes Kai back to another time. Drops him down into a place in the past he doesn't want to go. He casts around for something else to think about. Fastens on a picture sent to him by his sister Samia's back of the whole family, minus Kai, of course. Well, watching in Vancouver in the picture. His parents made uncertain, lumpish tourists wearing zipped cardigans and solemn expressions, like overgrown children. In between them, his sisters, two kids marked for the camera. The boy had pushed himself forward of the group so that his head was absurdly large within the frame. His sister's Canadian husband must have been behind the camera. Doubtless, the excursion was his idea. It would never occur to Kai's parents to go whale watching. They didn't understand those kinds of activities. Climbing a hill for the view, sending postcards containing a single line of text. Besides, there were whales right here. You could see them from the beach at certain times of the year. With his parents gone, Kai inhabited the house less and less, and then only in the hours of darkness. On weekends, when not with Neneba, he was with Chejani, and when he was with neither of them, he simply returned to the hospital. A Sunday, they operated upon a minor. The man, a Guinean, spoke only French. He'd been given an epidural rather than a full anesthetic. Nobody anticipating quite how awkward the procedure would prove to be. A steel pin, a repair to an earlier fracture, had slipped downwards into the knee joint and needed to be removed. They'd struggled to locate the tip of it within the femur. All the while, the man had lain upon his back, gazing at the ceiling, apparently indifferent to the bone-jarring drill. Afterwards, they emerged to a darkened city, thinking at first it was later than it was. In the staff room, there was talk of a coup. The Europeans went to the phones and began to dial their embassy switchboards. Kai left the hospital and entered the curfew quiet streets. On his way, he saw others ghosts fleeting through the narrow lanes away from the main road. On a corner, he collided with somebody's shoulder. The other man reached out to steady him. A moment later, Kai was on his way. Not a word had been spoken. The only sound the softly uttered grunt at first contact. The moon was waning crescent, a sliver of light escaping through a slit in the sky, just enough to outline faintly the edges of the house. Kai waited outside until he saw Neneba leave the sitting room. He stood up and skirted the house, walking in parallel to her. She inside, he outside. They both reached the bedroom at the same time. His fingers found the edge of the shutter when she returned from washing, still drying her face with one end of the towel. He was lying on his stomach across the bed. A quick break. Her eyes darted towards the door. Silently, she let the towel drop and slid into his embrace. You are crazy, she told him. What if my father finds you? You are not supposed to do this. You are supposed to say the password. Sorry, he pressed his face against her belly. His chin rested in shower damp hair. Go on. She lay back and placed her arms above her head. And then a small giggle. Not that. I mean, say the word. So he'd whispered their password there and then, but she didn't hear it, rather felt his breath, and arched her back slightly to meet him. Placing her arms on his shoulders, pressing down with open palms, he loved the even pacing of her breathing, the intake and release until the rhythm fell away, like a musician missing a string of notes, crashing down upon the keyboard. Later, tracing her form with the back of his hand, feeling the new darkness upon her skin, he caught her nipple between his index finger and middle finger and held it the way one would hold a cigarette. You'll have to stay, she said. You can't go now. It's too dangerous. I know, he replied, not knowing if she were talking about her father or the cook. From Kai's room in the student halls of residence, the return to their family homes restricted their lovemaking, bringing to it a new anticipation. Many times he had knocked on the shutter, whispered their password. Never had he slept there. That night he had not slept either, but lain awake and watched the changing light upon the bare wall, dawn slowly highlighting the shape of her beside him. It had rained hard in the night. The pattern of the rain played out upon the wall. The sound wrapped itself around them as they lay in the huddle of each other's hands. In the morning he had slipped out, the air clammy with dew and the exalted breath of sleepers. By then there was a new order. Kai awakens from the dreaming of her. From outside comes the sound of rain. For a while he imagined it is some part of the dream. Surely it is too early in the year for rain. The water resounds upon the roof. Kai rises and crosses the sitting room to turn up the music. Jimmy Cliff, wonderful world, beautiful people. He goes to the door and opens it, watching the rain, feeling the water splash up and touch his feet, his ankles. Gradually the glory of the music, the soothing sounds of the rain absorb the memory of the dream. On the fifth day, Kai opens the door of the bedroom to find Adrian up and half-dressed. At Kai's entrance, he slumps on the bed, apparently defeated by the effort of buttoning his trousers. There are faint shadows between his ribs. Tracks of purplish veins run beneath translucent skin. Where do you think you're going? I have to go in. Adrian struggles with the buckles of his belt. Kai shakes his head. Man, you can barely stand. Just for 2 hours, that's all. I have to see her. Who? My patient. Kai stands regarding Adrian's efforts for a moment. Then he crosses the room, takes a straight cotton shirt from the cupboard, hands it to Adrian, and watches as he forces one arm and then the other through the sleeves. A sheen of sweat upon his forehead. Kai steps forward to help with their buttons. I'll drive you, he says. Kai recognizes Iliana's from her voice over the telephone. She takes one look at Adrian. My God, you look awful. Don't worry, I've brought my doctor. Adrian smiles faintly and waves his arm at Kai, a lolling gesture. Like a barely animated ragdoll. Kai, Iliana, Kai. Iliana looks at Kai and nods briskly. Her attention immediately returns to Adrian. Listen, I'm really sorry, she says. It's malaria. Everyone gets it. Or so I'm told. No, I mean I'm sorry, Adrian. Agnes is gone. I'm so sorry. I should have called, but you were sick. The drive back takes place in silence. Adrian, his head resting upon the glass, gazes slightly out of the window. Kai understands the dismay that goes with losing a patient, in whatever manner. Each time you start work on a patient, you begin. He does not know a surgeon who is different. With total belief, it is a belief in the possibility of life, almost a spiritual belief which dwarfs all scientific knowledge, all medical learning. No information about the chances for the patient can assail it. You tackle a 1 in 100 with the same vigor you bring to a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 2. During the worst days of the war, the doctors would walk down the corridors, picking the injured men and women who might have a chance, leaving the others to die. He had experienced less conflict over doing so than he imagined. Yet once a patient had become their own, once the team became united in that goal, the loss was bitterly felt by all. In the event, it is Adrian who speaks first to ask if the air conditioning might be turned down. Kai reaches across and rests the back of his hand briefly on Adrian's brow. Your temperature is right back up. What you need is to cool down. He leans back and gropes about on the rear seat until he finds a plastic bottle of water. He hands it to Adrian. Kai sees him take a few sips, bracing himself against the jolting of the vehicle on the uneven road. He slows the vehicle and says, "From what you told me, she'll be back in a few months." Adrian stares ahead and wipes his mouth. "Yes, only I don't know if I'll still be here when she does." When they reach the flat, Adrian heads straight to the bedroom and Kai into the kitchen. Presently, Kai hears the sound of the cistern and Adrian returns to the sitting room. "Christ, I'm exhausted. By the way, is that normal? To be exhausted?" "Yes. No, I mean my piece. It's the color of orange." Kai laughs. "I forgot to warn you about that." The telephone rings. "Lisa." Kai listens to the restraint in Adrian's voice. He and Neneba had never got to that place, the place where politeness reasserts itself, had argued frequently. He notices Adrian makes no mention of his illness. That morning, when Kai had left Neneba's house and arrived back at the hospital, had been the first. There would be a lull. The storm would catch them all unaware. But all that was 2 years away from that morning. Right then, he'd been 26 years old. On the walk to work, he'd heard the sound of motors for the first time, beginning with the cheerful whistling overhead and ending in an explosion. He began to run, arriving to find the hospital in chaos. His heart still pumped from the run. To him, it was exhilarating. The army had mutinied and stormed the central prison. The prison gates had been torn down. The first casualties were prisoners. Burner Motley and the effects of smoke inhalation for the first wave of departing prisoners had set fire to their quarters, forgetting or perhaps heedless of the fate of the other inmates. Only the worst wounded came to the hospital, the others preferring to seize the opportunity which had presented itself. There were a few prison guards among them who thought they should be treated first, and some of the staff were in agreement. Kai hadn't cared. He merely set to work on the patients, one after the other. The fires burned all night. The sacking of the city continued. That day, apart from burns, he had treated more gunshot wounds than he had seen in his career. Late in the afternoon, he had stepped outside the building. Somebody offered him a cigarette, and though he didn't smoke, he placed it unlit between his lips. Rumors abounded. Two of the hotels were under siege, packed full of fleeing politicians. The Americans were coming. The British were sending a gunship. The central bank had been raided. There was money lying in the streets. Inside the empty staff room, a radio blared. The spokesman for the coup leaders issuing statements in broken English. The next time Kai left the building, it must have been around midnight. It It was dark. For the last 5 hours, he'd been working by the light of a camping lantern. He stood listening to the sound of gunfire. Later, it would never fail to amaze him how innocuous a sound it was in reality. Nothing like the loud bangs in the movies. A time would come when he would be able to identify the make and model of a weapon from the sound it made, match the resulting injuries to those weapon types. For now, he stood and stared at the sky, the iron-rich scent of blood rising from the stains on his gown. He felt exhausted and at the same time utterly content. He smiled. Then he remembered Nineveh. Evening comes. Kai is folding paper from memory in half, a corner here, an edge turned over. He runs a fingernail down a fold, working quickly, for speed is part of the purpose. His fingers move deftly, finally pulling the object into shape. A frog. He pulls it apart, smoothes out the creases, and begins again. This time, he fashions a long-necked camel, after that a swan. At home, origami animals line the windowsill in the room where a bird sleeps. Kai is about to dismantle the swan when Adrian comes into the room, clad only in his shorts. His hair is stuck in dark points to his forehead. He is holding a pair of scissors. Can you help me? Sure. Kai puts the swan back on the table. That's impressive. Adrian picks up the swan. Where did you learn to do this? I practice. He shrugs. He takes the scissors from Adrian. What do you want me to do with those? Cut my hair. It's driving me crazy. Kai raises and goes to stand behind Adrian. He picks up a strand of hair experimentally. Do you have a comb? Yes. Adrian fetches a comb from the bedroom. Kai selects a lock of hair. The texture is disconcertingly glassy. The small nail scissors scarcely gain patches. He snips at a few strands of hair, stops, watches the trembling in the fingers of the hand holding the scissors. This morning in surgery, he'd been obliged almost to ask another surgeon to handle a delicate task. He'd even gone so far as to imagine what he might say, pretend that a speck of something was caught under his iris, an excuse to leave the room. In the end, it had been all right. Kai concentrated on breathing and managed to steady his hands. Just once, he thought he saw the nurse's eye upon him. Sharp strands of hair fall to the floor. Your wife didn't want you to come here. Not as such. Kai considers Adrian's reply for a moment. That means no. I didn't really give her the opportunity to object, if I'm honest. Okay. I needed something else. I could look up and see my future rolling into the distance. I knew exactly what was going to happen every day. I used to wonder, too, whether if I disappeared it would make any difference to any of my clients' lives. I mean, in reality, as opposed to the short-term inconvenience, probably it was a dangerous thing to do, he lied. But you know what I mean. Kai does not know what he means. Still, he chooses not to say. This is the way Europeans talk, as though everybody shared their experiences. Adrian Stone suggested that the desire for something was all it took. They all live with endless possibility, leave their homes for the sake of something new. But the dream is woven from the fabric of freedom. For desire to exist, it requires the element of possibility. And that, for Kai, has never existed until now, with the arrival of the Janis letters. There, for the first time, is the element of possibility, kindling for the small flame of his own desire. He looks at Adrian's hair, which now is about an uneven 2 inches long all over. I don't think this is working, he says, and watches Adrian's tentative fingers appear over the horizon of his head. Wait, I'll go and get a pair of clippers from the store. When Kai walked away from the hospital the day of the coup, Nobody tried to stop him for the simple reason he told nobody he was going. The most direct route to Nineveh's house passed through the center of town. He reasoned nobody else would think to go that way, which was the extent of his forethought. Their hospital lay at the end of a street perpendicular to the main road. The street was empty, as Kai had never seen it. Even in the early hours of the morning, he kept moving, staying close to the walls of the buildings. A car, a Toyota, packed with joyriding soldiers, crossed the intersection ahead of him. Kai stopped and crouched next to a stinking gutter. The vehicle passed by, leaving a trail of sound. The tune stayed in his mind. From behind a corrugated iron yard door, he saw a child's face regarding him through rusted eyelids. Kai put a finger to his lips. He stood up, doubled back on himself. This time, he took the bay road, slung like a hammer between one high point of the town and another. The lowest point sagging through the city slums. The air was heavy with smoke, the tart fumes of burning fuel. A car approached him, traveling at speed. Kai caught a glimpse of the driver, a man wearing a Panama hat, driving with a ferocious concentration. Kai raised his hand to ask for a lift. The driver passed by without slowing. Kai had expected little else. By now, he had settled into a slow jog, marking time to the sound of his own breathing. At the roundabout, a roadblock, Kai slowed to a walk. 5 roads met at this point. He could see a dozen or so soldiers, some checking vehicles, others standing around. He saw the man with the Panama hat sitting behind the wheel of his car. A soldier opened the car door. The man climbed down, and the soldier took his place behind the vehicle. Kai could see the man's mouth, an oval of protest. A soldier patted the man on the shoulder from inside the vehicle. Another soldier threw his briefcase to him. The man clumsily tried to catch it. The vehicle backed out, clutched, screaming. Kai walked on with measured paces, his heart hammered in his chest. There was a ringing in his ears. He walked towards the checkpoint. There were people, those desperate enough to venture out, or else with nothing to lose, street boys and madmen. The street boys cheered every time a military vehicle passed. The madmen cursed when they saw Kai. Several of the soldiers yelled at him to turn back. Curfew, go to your home. Kai stopped, walking, and raised his hand. Then he approached slowly. He wanted them to see he was a doctor. Soldiers were almost superstitious about doctors, never knowing when they might need one. The smell of ganja was heavy in the air. Down each of the 5 roads, fires burnt, figures moved through the light and darkness. The sound of their calls like jackdaws. Manasare, somebody called him. A Bedford truck was slowing for the checkpoint. Kai looked up into darkness. Manasare, a hand reached out towards him through the wooden slats at the back of the truck. Automatically, Kai stretched out his own hand. Up ahead, the barrier was raised. The truck's engine revved and the vehicle began to gather speed again. Whoever it was called, I say, wait up, wait up. The truck stopped 5 yards on the other side of the barrier, and Kai raced towards it. He had no idea who he was running to, simply that this was his only chance. He climbed up onto the tailgate of the truck and sat down opposite the man who had called to him, an army officer around the same age as himself. Lucky I saw you there, my friend. Hindered by the darkness, Kai shrugged to recognize the other man at first. Then it came to him. 5-a-side football. Kai had been in the college team for a season. Lenana was his name. Lensana what? He couldn't remember. They've invited the rebels into the city for talks, they say. He told Kai, but look at this. Most of these are not our men. Some of them here, around them, drunken looters, staggered under the weight of their bounty. Cars abandoned full crates and boxes. The Bedford dropped Kai 2 streets short of Neneba's house. Take care, man. Lansana gave him a high five as he prepared to climb out of the truck. A glimmer of light momentarily revealed the other man's face to Kai. Behind the smiles, his eyes were flat, almost without expression. The look stayed with Kai for a long time afterwards, until finally he saw it for what it was: fear, nerves, or excitement. These had all been absent, and that in turn spoke of something else: the absence of hope. Kai thanked Lansana and wished he knew his surname. The army was divided, he told Nineveh. If the army was divided, it was dangerous for everyone. The army, the rebels, whoever they were attacking homes now, even the diplomatic mission and the houses of the whites. Funny, isn't it? Nineveh had said once. Not then. Before, when they were younger still at university. What were they talking about? Some faraway atrocity reported in the news. The students passed a resolution condemning it. That was it, yes. He had dismissed the action with a joke, but she had a dislike of cynicism. Hitler, Pol Pot. Funny, isn't it? How it only seems to be evil people who think they can change the world. I wonder why that is. And Kai had responded, because they are mad. She had dug a sharp elbow into his ribs. Then she shook her head. But they do, don't they? They do change the world. For the next 3 days, Kai walked alone to the hospital, where the medical staff continued to report for work and treat the wounded with detached determination. This was their job, their life. At those times, Kai was happy. The memories come at unguarded moments when he cannot sleep in the past. At the heat of it, he had attended to people whose limbs had been severed, working with a Scottish pain expert. Years later, he treated some of those same patients again. They complained of feeling pain in their lost limbs, the aching ghost of a hewn hand or foot. It was a trick of the mind, the Scotsman explained to Kai. The nerves continue to transmit signals between the brain and the ghost limb. The pain is real, yes, but it is a memory of pain. And when he wakes from dreaming of her, is it not the same for him? The hollowness in his chest, the tense yearning, the loneliness he braces against every morning until he can immerse himself in work and forget, not love, something else, something with a power that endures, not love, but a memory of love.